Welcome aboard the Story Ark. We have a special treat for you today. Today I present to you part 1 of the Story Ark Presents American Demigods. This is a collaboration with students from Brigham Young University, where we will be diving into the American demigods, folk heroes and tall tale characters that ride the line between human and divine in a uniquely American way. This has been researched and written by BYU's extraordinary students, so I hope you'll enjoy. Today we're diving into the American demigods Pecos Bill and Paul Bunyan. Let's get into it. Well now, saddle up and hold on to your hat, because we're about to ride straight into the wild, whirling, whip-cracking world of one of the most legendary figures ever to stomp across the sagebrush, Pecos Bill. He ain't just a single story or a one-time yarn. He's a whole library of tall tales rolled into one rootin' tootin' cowboy. From the dusty plains of Texas to the jagged cliffs of the Grand Canyon, Bill's name echoes through the folklore of the American West like a coyote's howl on a moonlit night. You see, Pecos Bill isn't just a character, he's a symbol. A walking exaggeration of everything folks imagine a cowboy could be. Tougher than a $2 steak, faster than a prairie fire, and wilder than a bronco with a burr under its saddle. His stories were passed around campfires, saloons, bunkhouses, and schoolrooms, growing bigger and bolder with every retelling. And just like the West itself, Bill's legend is sprawling, unpredictable, and full of surprises. Now, according to S.E. Chaucer, one of the great collectors of American folklore over at AmericanFolklore.net, here's how the whole shebang got started, how Pecos Bill came into the world. Bill was born somewhere along the banks of the Pecos River, deep in the heart of Texas. But fate had other plans for this little tyke. As the story goes, his family was headed west in the covered wagon when, bump, Bill got jostled right out the back and landed in the dust. His folks didn't notice he was gone until they were miles down the trail, and by then, well, Bill had already been scooped up by a pack of wild coyotes. That's right, he was raised by coyotes. Learned to howl, hunt, and run with the pack. Grew up thinking he was just another critter in the desert until one day he met a cowboy and realized he didn't have a tail. That's when it hit him. He was human, and not just any human. He was Pecos Bill, destined to become the greatest cowboy the West had ever seen. From there, the stories took off like tumbleweeds in a windstorm. Some say he invented the branding iron and the lasso. Others claim he could ride anything that moved. Mountain lions, tornadoes, even earthquakes. He dug rivers with his spurs, flattened hills with his fists, and taught rattlesnakes how to behave. And every time someone told the story, they added a little more spice, a little more swagger, until Bill became a walking monument to frontier imagination. So hang tight, partner. We're just getting started. Let's see what other wild feats and origin myths Pecos Bill has up his dusty sleeve. You might just find yourself believing the unbelievable.
Well now, Pecos Bill was born in the usual way to a real nice cowpoke and his wife, who were journeying west with their 18 children. Bill's ma knew right from the start that he was something else. He started talking before he was a month old, did his teething on his pa's bow knife, and rode his first horse just as soon as he learned to sit up on his own. When he started to crawl, Pecos Bill would slither out of the wagon while his mama was cooking supper and wrestle with the bear cubs and other wild animals that roamed the prairies. Yep, the whole family was expecting great things of little Bill until they lost him in the drink. Seems they took the wagons over the Pecos River while Pecos Bill was taking a nap, and he bounced out of the back and swept downstream before anyone missed him. If he hadn't taught himself to swim right quick, he would have been a goner. Right about the time Pecos Bill was drying out and trying to get a fix on where he was, a mama coyote came along and decided to adopt the poor waif and raise him with the rest of her pups. So Pecos Bill spent the last 15 years of his life running around with the coyote pack, howling to the moon, chasing prey across the prairies, and having the time of his life. Pecos Bill plumb forgot all about his real family until the day he turned 16 and his older brother came along. He was punching a herd of longhorn cattle and had brought them down to drink from the Pecos River. The old cowpoke took one look at Pecos Bill and knew he'd found his long-lost brother on account of he looked just like their ma, He died of a broken heart after they lost Lil Bill in the river. "See here? Ain't you Pecos Bill, my little brother?" demanded the cowpoke of Pecos Bill when he came jumping over a giant log to run about in the field and howl at the moon. "Don't think so," said Pecos Bill. "I'm a coyote. Listen to me howl." Pecos Bill let out a horrendous shout and scampered about the field on all fours. He scared the herd so bad that the longhorns almost stampeded. "You stop that," Bill's brother shouted after he got the cattle calmed down, "and tell me this. How come you ain't got a long bushy tail if you're a coyote?" That was a tricky question. Pecos Bill thought about it for a long time. "I got fleas," he volunteered, "and I howl at the moon." "Everybody in Texas has fleas and howls at the moon. That ain't no excuse," said his big brother. "Anyhow, you can walk upright like a normal person, and you could talk too. That ain't what a coyote does." "I guess you're right," said Pecos Bill. "Of course I'm right. I'm your big brother and I ought to know," snapped the cowpoke. "It's about time you stopped fooling around on the prairie and became a cowboy like all the rest of us." That made good sense to Pecos Bill. So he bid farewell to the coyote pack and went out west with his brother to learn to be a cowboy. Soon as he had learned the ropes some, Pecos Bill began to realize that the cowboys needed some new tricks to help them cope with them stubborn longhorns. The cowboys kept getting the cows mixed up, which made the owners mad, so Pecos Bill invented the branding iron so they could put a mark on each cow, telling everybody who owned it. Then he noticed that the other cowboys were having trouble making the wilder cows behave. Now, whenever Pecos Bill saw a cow misbehaving, he'd jump up on its back and ride it until it had bucked and kicked itself into behaving better. But the other cowboys weren't so skilled as Bill, so he invented the lasso to help them tame the wild cows. Pecos Bill brother was right proud of him. "Not bad for a kid raised by coyotes," he told his baby brother. "In a couple of years, you'll be the toughest cowboy in the world." And he was right.
Here we've got ourselves a classic example of a character legend, a type of folktale built around a larger-than-life figure whose adventures are just as wild as the land they roam. In this case, we're talking about none other than Pecos Bill, the rootin' tootin' rattlesnake wrangling cowboy of the American Southwest. Now, the core beats of Bill's origin story tend to stay pretty steady, no matter who's telling it. Most versions agree that he was tossed from the back of a covered wagon as a baby. Some say during a dust storm, others claim it was a run-in with a bump on the trail, and left behind in the wild. But instead of perishing, little Bill was scooped up and raised by a pack of coyotes. That's right, he howled at the moon, ran with the pack, and grew up thinking he was just another four-legged critter until he met some cowboys and realized he was a bit different. But while the bones of the story stay the same, each storyteller adds their own seasoning to the stew. Some say Bill could rope a stampede with a single strand of his mustache. Others claim he used a rattlesnake as a whip and rode a mountain lion like a pony. In this particular version, Bill is credited with inventing two of the most iconic tools of the cowboy trade, the branding iron and the lasso. That makes this tale not just a character legend, but also an etiological legend, a story that explains how something came to be. Etiological legends are like folklore's origin myths. They don't just entertain, they offer explanations for why the world is the way it is. Why do cowboys brand cattle? Because Pecos Bill needed a way to keep track of his herd. Why do they use lassos? Because Bill needed a tool to wrangle mild mustangs faster than he could run. These stories give everyday objects and practices a mythic backstory, tying them to the heroes who could shape the land with their bare hands and a bit of grit. So as you listen to this next tale, keep your ears open. See if you can spot the etiological claims tucked inside the action. Those little moments where the storyteller says, "And that's how this came to be." It might be the invention of a tool, the naming of a place, or the explanation for a natural wonder. In the world of tall tales, even the most ordinary things have extraordinary beginnings. Let's ride on into the next chapter and see what Bill's up to this time.
Now, everyone in the West knows that Pecos Bill could ride anything. No bronco could throw him, no sir. Fact is, I only heard of Bill getting throwed once in his whole career as cowboy. Yep, It was that time he was up in Kansas way and decided to ride him a tornado. Now, Bill wasn't going to ride just any tornado, no ma'am. He waited for the biggest gold-earned tornado you ever saw. It was turning the sky black and green and roaring so damn loud it woke up the farmers away over in China. Well, Bill just grabbed that there tornado, pushed it into the ground, and jumped on its back. The tornado whipped and whirled and sidewinded and generally cussed its bad luck all the way down to Texas. Tied the rivers into knots, flattened all the forests so bad they had to rename one place the Staked Plains. But Bill just rode along all calm-like, giving an occasional jab with his spurs. Finally, that tornado decided that it wasn't getting rid of this cowboy off its back no how. It headed out west to California I-8 and just ran itself out. Made so much water, it washed out the Grand Canyon. That tornado was down to practically nothing when Bill finally fell off. He hit the ground so hard it sank below sea level. Folks call the spot Death Valley. Anyway, that's how the rodeo got started, though most cowboys stick to broncos these days.
In some versions of the tale, Pecos Bill doesn't just tame a tornado, he lassos it with a rattlesnake. That's right, a live, writhing rattler, coiled and ready, used like a rope to wrangle a full-blown cyclone. Now, if that ain't the wildest image you've ever heard, I don't know what is. But that's the magic of a tall tale. The more outrageous, the better. And did you catch all the etiological legends tied to that one story? According to some storytellers, Bill's tussle with the tornado didn't just stir up dust. It reshaped the very land itself. They say the force of that fight was so mighty it carved out the Grand Canyon, scorched the earth into what we now call Death Valley, and even forced a place to change its name to Staked Plains. Because the wind was so fierce, folks had to stake down everything they owned just to keep it from blowing away. And if that wasn't enough, the whole rodeo tradition supposedly started when Bill tried to teach frontier folk how to ride wild critters the way he did, with grit, guts, and a grin. That's a whole lot of origin story packed into one man's legend. But that's the point, isn't it? Pecos Bill wasn't just a cowboy, he was the cowboy. The embodiment of frontier bravado, the kind of fella who could drink a river dry, ride a cougar like a pony, and shoot the stars out of the sky just for fun. Some folklorists believe these stories weren't just entertainment. They were satire, a playful jab at the way cowboys bragged and boasted around the campfire. You know how it goes. One fella says he roped a steer with a barbed wire fence, and the next says he roped a thunderstorm with his belt buckle. The stories got bigger, bolder, and more impossible with every telling. Pecos Bill became the ultimate exaggeration, a parody of the cowboy myth, stretched to its wildest limits. But even in parody, there's truth. These tales reflect the spirit of the American West, untamed, unpredictable, and full of characters who refused to be ordinary. They gave voice to a culture that valued toughness, wit, and a good story told with a wink. And speaking of stories that stretch the bounds of belief, let's take a look at how these tall tales shaped American identity. Not just through their characters, but through the landscapes they claimed to create. From Paul Bunyan's forests to Pecos Bill's deserts, these legends didn't just live in the wild, they made it wilder.
Now, I hear tell Paul Bunyan was born smack dab in Bangor, Maine, on a foggy morn so thick the sun had to squint to find the horizon. Folks say it took not one, but two, but 5 giant storks, each as big as a barn and flapping like thunderclouds, to haul that baby boy down from the heavens. They flew in formation like a squadron, carrying Paul in a cradle made from a hollowed-out redwood log, wrapped in a quilt stitched from mountain lion pelts. His first bed? Well, it weren't no crib from the general store. His daddy laid him down in a full-sized lumber wagon, the kind used to haul whole forest, pulled by a team of 12 draft horses with hooves the size of wash tugs. Whenever little Paul got fussy, his pa had to hitch up the team and drive that wagon all the way up to the tippy top of Maine and back again just to rock him to sleep. You could hear them horses clopping from 3 counties over, echoing through the pine like thunder on stilts. Now, Paul weren't no ordinary baby. Soon as he let out his first holler, It rattled the windows so clean off the church house and sent every fish in the Kennebec River leaping for dry land. The frogs, bless their hearts, started wearing earmuffs made from squirrel tails just so they weren't go deaf when Paul screamed for his breakfast. His appetite, Lord have mercy. His mama had to milk 24 cows twice a day just to keep his milk bottle from running dry. And that bottle? It was a repurposed grain silo with a rubber net filled the size of a wagon wheel. Every 2 hours, she'd roll out 10 barrels of porridge, thick as cement and sweetened with maple syrup, and shovel it into his mouth with a snow shovel. If she missed feeding, Paul's belly would rumble so fierce it'd shake the house off its foundation and send the chickens into an early molt. By the end of his first week, Paul was wearing his daddy's overalls, though he had to let out the seams with a logging axe. By week 3, he'd grown so big and restless that when he rolled over for a nap, he flattened 4 square miles of prime timberland. Oak, birch, and spruce all pancaked like flapjacks at a lumberjack breakfast. His parents were plumb frazzled, running out of land and patience. So, they built him a raft, big as a football field and lashed together with iron chains, and floated it off the coast of Maine, hoping the sea breeze might lull him to sleep. But when Paul turned over in a slumber, he kicked up the 75-foot tidal wave that crashed into the Bay of Fundy and soaked Nova Scotia clean through. The British Navy had to be called in, and they sailed over with every ship they had, firing cannons for 7 hours straight just to rouse the boy. When Paul finally woke, he sat up, stretched, and accidentally sank 4 warships with his elbow. He had to wade through the wreckage, scooping sailors out of the drink like minnows in a rain barrel, apologizing all the while. After that whole ruckus, his folks figured the East was just too dinky for a boy like Paul, so they picked up their gear, hitched the wagon, and headed west to Minnesota, where the trees grow taller, the lakes run deeper, and the land's got a bit more elbow room for a fellow the size of Paul.
And we can't forget the 2 most important aspects of Paul Bunyan's story: his identity as a logger and his legendary companion, Babe the Blue Ox. Just like Pecos Bill was the quintessential cowboy, wrangling tornadoes and riding mountain lions across the plains, Paul Bunyan was the ultimate lumberjack, carving his way through the forests of the Northwoods with an axe the size of a church steeple. Logging wasn't just Bunyan's profession, it was his mythic domain. He didn't just fell trees, he reshaped entire landscapes. Rivers bent to his will, mountains flattened under his boots, and forests trembled when he sneezed. In a time when America was expanding westward and taming its wild terrain, Paul Bunyan became a symbol of human grit and frontier ingenuity. He represented the kind of strength and endurance that loggers, real ones, had to summon every day just to survive. And then there's Babe. Not just any ox, but a massive blue one. So big his hoof prints turned into lakes and his breath could freeze a snowstorm mid-air. Babe wasn't just a sidekick. He was a force of nature in his own right. Together, Paul and Babe formed a duo that embodied the spirit of the wilderness, rugged, loyal, and larger than life. Their friendship is one of the most enduring parts of their tale. 2 giants roaming the land, solving problems with brute strength and good humor. The color blue itself adds to Babe's mystique. Some say he turned blue during a particularly harsh winter, when the snow piled so high it blocked out the sun for weeks. Others claimed he was born that way, a creature of pure folklore as fantastical as the stories themselves. Babe's presence beside Paul Bunyan elevates the tale from mere exaggeration to full-blown legend. Together, they're not just characters, they're archetypes. Paul is the master of the axe, the shaper of the land, and Babe is the embodiment of raw, untamed power. Their stories echo the values of the frontier: hard work, resilience, and a touch of whimsy in the face of impossible odds.
Well now, let me spin you a yarn about the time Paul Bunyan and his trusty ox Babe took on the biggest, meanest logjam the Wisconsin River ever did see. It was one of them crisp spring mornings, the kind where the mist hangs low and the river's rushing like it's got somewhere mighty important to be. The loggers had been working that stretch river for years, but on this particular day, they come upon a sight that nearly knocked the chaw out of their mouths. Logs, big ones, big as church pews, were stacked 200 feet high, a tangled nest of pine and spruce stretching upriver for a mile or more. It looked like a beaver had tried to build up a dam for the Almighty himself. Those loggers chopped, hauled, cursed, and sweated. They brought in axes, saws, dynamite, and even tried singing to the logs to coax them loose. But that jam wouldn't budge. Not a splinter, not a twitch. So they did what any sensible folk would do when nature throws a tantrum. They hollered for Paul Bunyan. Paul came striding down the ridge with Babe the blue ox trouncing behind him, hooves thumping like a thunder on a tin roof. Paul took one look at that jam, scratched his beard, and said, "Well, boys, this here's a pickle, but I reckon we could stir it loose." He told the loggers to step back, way back, and not to blink unless they wanted sawdust in their eyeballs. Then he led Babe into the river right up to the front of that logjam. Babe stood there, tail twitching, looking mighty confused. Paul pulled out his rifle, shorter than a fence post, and started peppering Babe's hide with buckshot. Now, Babe didn't mind much. Figured he was being pestered by a swarm of them devilish river flies, kind that bite through the denim and insult your mother while they're at it. So he started swishing his tail back and forth real hard like he was trying to knock the moon out of the sky. Well, that tail stirred up the river something fierce. The water got so agitated it forgot which way it was supposed to flow and started running upstream, hauling them logs with it like they was leaves in a whirlpool. Bit by bit, the jam started to crack, groan, and finally burst apart like a stack of matchsticks in a windstorm. Once the river was good and churned, Paul whistled and pulled Babe out of the water. The river gave a sigh of relief, turned itself back around, and the logs floated downstream like they was late for supper. The loggers cheered, hats flying in the air, and Paul just tipped his cap and said, "Next time, try tickling the river first."
I mean, honestly, I still can't get over the fact that Paul Bunyan would shoot his own ox. Even if he knew it wouldn't hurt Babe, it feels downright rude. That poor creature probably thought he was being attacked by a swarm of river flies with a personal vendetta. But then again, this is Paul Bunyan we're talking about, the man who could clear a forest with a sneeze and dig a canyon just by dragging his axe behind him. So maybe peppering his ox with buckshot was just a way of saying, giddy up. Still, it's wild to imagine that Babe's tail, just a flick of it, could stir the river so hard it reversed its course. That's not just strong, that's mythic. It gives you a sense of the scale we're dealing with in these stories. Paul and Babe weren't just big, they were impossibly, comically, cosmically big. Big enough to reshape landscapes, reroute rivers, and make the laws of physics politely step aside. Of course, nobody really believes Paul Bunyan and Babe were that enormous, or that they, and characters like Pecos Bill, who supposedly lassoed tornadoes, actually walked the earth. That's why we call them tall tales. They're exaggerated, fantastical, and often downright ridiculous. But they're also deeply rooted in something real. So why do these stories stick around? Why do we still tell them, laugh at them, and teach them to kids in school? Well, these tales were born out of the American frontier, out in the wilds of the West where life was hard and the land was harder. Cowboys, loggers, and pioneers lived far from the comforts of big cities. They were isolated, surrounded by untamed wilderness, and constantly battling the elements. Nature wasn't just scenery, it was a force to reckon with. Blizzards, floods, wild animals, and endless trees to fell. It makes sense that folks in these conditions would dream up heroes who could do the impossible. Not just to survive the wilderness, but to tame it, bend it, laugh in its face. Tall tales gave people a way to imagine control over a world that often felt uncontrollable. They turned everyday labor, logging, ranching, exploring, into epic feats. They made the ordinary extraordinary. And they gave communities a shared mythology, something to pass around the campfire or tell the kids at bedtime. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were identity. They were pride. They were hope. And maybe, deep down, they were a way of saying, if Paul Bunyan could do it, maybe I can too.
The Story Ark is a production of Food for Thought Audio. The Story Ark is hosted by Kenny Mears. This episode was produced in association with students from Brigham Young University. A huge thanks to everyone who contributes to this episode. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts for more content. And as always, thanks for your comments. We read them all, and thanks for listening.